All right, hello once again, Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College. And as part of the Rankin Technical College Application and Website Development, or AWD1111, database, whatever it is, database-driven web development. As part of that class, I'm creating a series of video presentations based on a lot of different things. And what we're talking about right now is the PDF document from Mr. Flavio Copes and the Valley of Code website. So I am in his Node.js handbook, and so far we have gone over part of chapter 1. All right, we did the Node.js has a vast number of libraries and an example of an application. We spent most of the time on that. So I'm going to jump into this, the Node.js frameworks and tools. All right, so Node.js is a low-level platform. In other words, it doesn't have a lot of stuff right out of the box. Now, that said, that's sort of a lie because you already saw with that API that it does have a lot of stuff out of the box. All right? But over time, many developers have added things that you're available to use now with Node.js. Most of these, are available through the Node Package Manager, which we've already taken a quick look at. The one that we will end up using most often, and virtually once we get going in here, in virtually every single, virtually every single app that we do will be Express. And as it says, it's one of the most simple yet powerful ways to create a web server. All right. It's got a minimalistic approach. What does that mean? That means that there are a lot of things that you can do with it, but very few of those things are forced upon you. It's unopinionated, which means that rather than something that's not minimalist, something that is opinionated, means that every time you do something, you have to follow a certain set of steps. You don't have to do that per se with Express. Now, we will typically be using the same kind of setup every time, all right? But with that said, it's not at all opinionated like a lot of other software is. As it says, it's focused on the core features of the server, and that's the key to its success. Now, I've never used Meteor. And as it says, it's a full stack framework. Well, what is that? Well, the full stack that we're using in this class, and this has already been mentioned to you, that the full stack that we're using in this class is the MERN stack. M for MongoDB, E for Express, R for React, N for Node.js. All right, now that said, the only one that we've touched on it here at all, a little bit now, has been Node. We're going to have total things that we do eventually, big units that we're going to have on MongoDB, we will hit the Express stuff, and we will have a whole big thing on React, just so you know. All right. Koa, as it says, it's built by the same team that built Express. Aims to be even simpler and smaller, so even being more minimalistic and even more non-opinionated. All right, then there's Next.js, as it says. It's a framework to render server-side rendered React applications. I hope we have some time to look at Next.js in this class. We'll see. There's Micro, a lightweight server to create asynchronous HTTP microservices. And don't worry about what those are right now. Socket.io, to build network applications. A lot of times these are for like chat applications where you want to basically build your own type of thing, a very simplistic type of chat where you can have different users talk to one another. SvelteKit, as it says, it's a framework for building web apps of all sizes. Remix, another full stack web framework for building user experiences. Fastify, a fast and efficient web framework focused on providing the best user-developer experience. Inspired by Happy and Express. And we'll talk again about a lot of this stuff as we go on. Part of the problem with this, part of the problem is it's like, where do you start? Because when you start talking about something, sometimes it's going to expect you've already, if you start talking about A, you'll probably get to a point where it expects you know something about B. And if you haven't discussed B yet, A is not going to totally make sense. All right. But if you started with B, it'll eventually come back to where it expects that you understand something about A. So you're kind of back and forth in here. So let's go quickly through this history. And as it says, Node is 13 years old. It's only half as old as JavaScript. It's only, a little more than a third as old, I guess. 40% as old, whatever you want to call it, as the web itself. During its time, Node.js seems like it's been around forever. It says in this post, we draw a big picture of Node and its history. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. Some people are very much into history for different software and what did it do? Why do we, how did we get to where we are, etc. A lot of people just don't care. All right. So it says here a little bit of history. JavaScript is a programming language created at Netscape. Yeah. So 26 years ago, do the math. What does that make it? 1996? Something like that. It was set up as a scripting tool to manipulate web pages. At that time, there were two browsers. There was Internet Explorer and there was Netscape Navigator. That was it. All right, you didn't have Chrome, you didn't have Firefox, etc. Part of the business model of Netscape, as it says, was to sell web servers. That's why it included an environment known as Netscape Livewire, where you could create dynamic web pages. As it says, unfortunately, it wasn't very successful, and server-side JavaScript at that time kind of died on the vine, but it's been brought back, and that's what we're using in here. One key factor, as mentioned there, that led to the rise of Node was timing. All right, just a few years earlier, JavaScript had started to become a more serious language. For a long time, people considered JavaScript to kind of be a toy, for lack of better words. JavaScript engines also became better, more performant. All right. So Node.js happened to be built in the right place at the right time. But as mentioned right there, as it says, it also introduces a lot of innovative thinking. So first version 2.0.1. Now notice the next year, Express was added. And Express has been added to simplify writing Node.js apps. Okay. Then we had version 3. Notice big companies start adopting it. LinkedIn, Uber. These are not small companies. And you'll notice that at least a minor release came up just about every year. All right. So I don't know anything about Ghost, but Koa was born. Again, these are all hyperlinks, so if you want more, you can go there. In 2015, the Node.js Foundation was born. All right, that's openjsf.org. If you want to take a look at it, it's got a lot of free information on there and stuff you can use. All right, notice in 2017, so about 5 years ago, V8. V8 is the engine that powers the Chrome browser. So V8 introduces Node in its testing suite, making Node a target for the JS engine in addition to Chrome. 3 billion downloads from the Node package manager per week. And that was 5 years ago. 2018, they started adding support for the latest and greatest that was available in JavaScript, those being the ES modules. All right. 2019, 2020, 2021, and here we are. All right. Now, these numbers that are in here, this is the number of the chapter that they're on, and they're just breaking it down by basically version numbers. All right, 16, 17, 18, etc. I didn't mention this to you before, but a couple things just, and I should have done this after we went in here and downloaded Node. If I want to make sure Node was downloaded correctly, I can stop my run here and just type in Node -v. And it says we're running version 16.16.0. I can also see what version of the package manager, the Node package manager, I'm running with the npm -v. And you'll notice there, what doesn't it like? It says it's, that's interesting. Nope, doesn't like that. Wow. Well, I know you used to be able to find out the version of the Node package manager you were running. Oh, it is showing it though, 8.11.0. Okay. All right. Now, this we should be able to run through quickly because I've already shown it to you. I went out to just node.js.org, and I clicked on the long-term support button that was in there and just accepted each and every one of the defaults. This is how you set it up for a Mac, so I'm just skipping that. All right. The next portion in here, how much JavaScript do you need to know to use Node? The smart alecky answer is the more the better. All right. It says, while learning to code, you might become confused as to where JavaScript ends and where Node begins and vice versa. And the author says, here Cope says, I would recommend you have a good grasp of the following. I'm not going to read any of these. We have talked about most of this stuff that's in here. All right. So it says here, with these concepts in mind, you're well on your way to becoming proficient using Node. It says the following concepts are also an important part. Now, I've given you my take on doing some work with asynchronous programming. I have talked to you about callbacks. I have shown you timers. I have discussed promises. I have discussed async and await. We talked about closures in the AWD1111 class. The way that I look at a closure is it allows you to kind of put a function inside of a function. That's my take on it in a nutshell. All right. And the event loop is basically on how everything works. It says it's one of the most important aspects to understand about JavaScript. This post explains it in simple terms. It's a little longer, and it's very pictorial. So the event loop, as it says, is one of the most important aspects to understand about JavaScript. It says, I programmed for years, yet I've never fully understood how things work under the hood. That's what they're talking about in here. I'm not going to go right now and talk about this. I'm not going to do this right now. All right? All right. Differences between Node.js and the browser. Both the browser and Node.js use JavaScript as their programming language. However, building apps that run in the browser is completely different than building a Node.js application. That's even though they're both using JavaScript. From the perspective of a front-end developer, Node.js, allows you to use JavaScript on both the front end and the back end. Already talked about this. All right. What changes, as they mentioned right there, is the ecosystem. It says in the browser, Most of the time, what you're doing is interacting with a document object model or with other web platform APIs. These don't exist in Node, so there is no DOM. There is no window object in here. There is no document object in here. Also, as mentioned right there in the browser, you don't typically have all the nice APIs that are provided by Node. Things like the file system. And what does that mean? That means that rather than having those built in where you can download them and start using them, you have to write them yourself. Another big difference, as it says, is that in Node.js, you control the environment. As mentioned here, unless you're building an open source app, you know which version of Node you will run the application on. With the browser app, you don't know. You don't even know what browser they're using necessarily. The big advantage here, as you can see at the top of the screen, says this means that you can write all the modern ES6, ES7, ES8, and ES9 JavaScript and put it inside of a Node app where some of that stuff may or may not be available in a browser app. Since JavaScript moves so fast, but browsers can be slow and users slow to upgrade, sometimes on the web you are stuck using the older JavaScript ECMA releases, typically ECMA 5 and ECMA 6, as opposed to 7, 8, and 9 as well. Now, we will talk about this, not right now, other than to kind of show it to you, but as it says, if you've never heard this before, Babel is software. So if I come in here and I type in Babel, it's going to give me different stuff. It says the compiler for the next generation JavaScript. So if I click on that, it's babeljs.io. All right. What they're saying here is if you write something like this in one side, if you write standard JavaScript, it'll show you on the other side how that is going to basically get changed using Babel so that if you're using an older browser, it'll still be able to work with your application. Again, if that doesn't make a lot of sense to you, don't let it bother you, please. All right. So a little bit here, as it says, about the V8 JavaScript engine. Notice V8 is the name of the JavaScript engine that powers Google Chrome. It's the thing that takes the JavaScript and executes it while browsing with Chrome. Basically what happened was this guy, I think it's Roland Dahl, I think that's who it was, came in and said, you know, I want to be able to grab this. I want to be able to take this engine. I want to strip it out of here, use it myself, and add some C++ code to make it work with JavaScript and make it work on a browser. All right. The cool thing, as it says there, is that the JavaScript engine is browser agnostic. In other words, it doesn't care what browser you're using. This, as mentioned, is one of the key features that enabled the rise of Node.js. It says other JS engines. This is not. The JS engine for Firefox is SpiderMonkey. All right. Safari has JavaScript Core. Edge was eventually on what was called Chakra, but more today it's on Chromium and again the V8. All of these engines, as mentioned right here, implement ECMA ES262 standard known as ECMAScript, which we have talked about before. All right. So as we go in here, the first thing to notice, as it says, the V8 engine was born, or written, I should say, in C++, and it is constantly being improved as necessary. So the author says here in this little mini introduction that he's giving, says we will ignore the implementation details of V8. All right, you can go out to the V8 website if you want those. It's always evolving. On the web, There's a race for performance that's been going on for years. Why? Because, if somebody comes out and says, hey, if somebody were to come out tomorrow and say, you know what, they've made some changes to Microsoft Edge, it's now 3 times as fast as using Chrome. I have to tell you the truth, even though I'm a Chrome zealot, so to speak, I'd go check it out just to see if indeed it was true. All right. For compilation, as it says right here, JavaScript is generally considered an interpreted language. Modern JavaScript engines no longer just interpret JavaScript, they compile it. The big difference is when you've got something that's an interpreted language, if it finds an error in the code, it'll stop until you fix it. With a compiled language, if it finds errors in your code, it'll flag the errors but keep going. All right. JavaScript is internally compiled by V8 using JIT or just-in-time compilation. All right. JavaScript has evolved from a language that was generally executing a few dozen lines of code. And what was that? That was the ability to go in and add a date onto the bottom of a web page or something like that. A little bit of interactivity. All right. Now, JavaScript has evolved to complete applications with hundreds of thousands of lines or more running in the browser. All right. Applications can now run for hours inside the browser, as it says, rather than being just a few form validation rules. JavaScript makes perfect sense to use here. And again, the big takeaway, the big reason that we talked about was the fact that you can use the same language both on the client side and on the server side. All right. So it says running Node.js scripts from the command line. It says the usual way to run a Node.js program is to run the globally available node command. That's already what I have shown you. All right. So you say node followed by the name of the file. This is exactly what I did. Again, you can put in the .js extension. You don't need to put in the .js extension. It's your call. All right. It defaults to using a JS file. Now, I'm not going to say any more about this because you might find it confusing. So why confuse you? All right. Now, might as well show you this now because they're showing it here. And that is how you can make nodes so you don't have to constantly restart it. Okay. Now, I've shown you this before, but I want to show it to you again. And we'll see if what I mentioned to you before is correct or incorrect. Let me clear this. All right. And I'm going to come in here and say node app.js and hit enter. The program's now running. Okay, you've already seen this. If I go out to here, I'm going to close a couple of these right now. And I can refresh. It says exactly what it did before. You can see that. All right. If I go back to my program here, and let's get rid of this. So let's just put in what we had to begin with. So that was just our hello world, like this. All right. So I've got that stuff in there. And I'm going to do a file, save, okay? Now I'm going to go back into here, and I'm going to refresh. And it hasn't changed. And the reason is I made changes to my I made changes to my server-side JavaScript file. But the server is kind of a stupid animal in that it doesn't recognize those changes. But you'll notice if I come back in here and if I stop my run, remember I stop it by coming in and doing a Control-C. Now if I start it up again and hit enter, now if I go back again into here and I refresh it, now that's gone. Well, that's a pain in the butt to have to keep starting and stopping the server. So what we can do is we can add one of the built-in packages. I'm sorry, not a built-in package. Something from the Node Package Manager. So here was our Node Package Manager. and we're going to search for something that's called NodeMon. And that's short for Node Monitor. So if you want to find out any of these things that as we go and install them, what they mean, all right, if it's an external package, you go out to npmjs.org, which is the Node Package Manager, and you search for it. So if I come in here, what's kind of neat about it, first thing, 4 million downloads a week, so people are using it, which should mean that it's very, very stable. All right, again, it has its own GitHub page, and this is how you set it up. Now, this is one way of setting it up, okay? And I don't want to confuse you too much, not too much, but I want to show you something right now. I'm jumping ahead in our book a little bit, not because I'm trying to confuse you, just the opposite, because I don't want to confuse you. All right? When we set up this program, and you can see it's working just fine the way it is. But, you know, it's not doing very much. Now it's saying hello world. So I'm going to go back into here, and I'm going to stop my run. Okay? I'm going to clear this, and I'm going to move this way up so you can see what's happening here. Usually, what happens when you start to create a Node application, normally what happens is when you come in here, you first initialize your project by typing in npm space init. Now, I'm going to show you a couple things. First of all, it's going to ask us a bunch of questions. This is going to ask us a bunch of questions, all right? And when it does, by and large, we're going to hit enter almost every time just to accept the default. But before we do that, let's do one more thing, because one of the things they'll ask is what repository do you want connected to this? So let me go into GitHub. All right, well, I'm at Brad Traversy's. I don't need his. All right, so here I'm in GitHub, and it's telling me to sign up. I thought it would have me in here already. So let's see. Email address. Well, this ain't good because I never remember my GitHub. Sign up for GitHub. Where's the login? Sign in. There we go. All right, so sign in. It says we just sent you a thing to my ranking account. All right. Just grab it here from my phone. That's what you hear in the background. Okay, so that didn't send it to my phone, so let me just go in here into Outlook, see if it has sent it. GitHub. Give me this notification. There's my code. Okay. So put in that code. Verifying. Good. I'm in. All right. Yeah, JP Scott. I'm in. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to click the plus sign and say new repository. And I'm just going to come in here and give it a name. I'm going to call it First Node App. Should be available. I don't think I've ever used that before. All right. And I'll just put a description in. This is the first app being written for the AWD1111 database driven web development. I think that's what it's called. Class. We'll make it public. Yours will be private, of course, but I'll make mine public. All right. I could add a README. I don't have to. The git ignore will actually become important in here, but not right now. We're not going to worry about it. And for the license, I'll just choose MIT license. And I'm going to click. Why is that being grayed out? No template. There's that. Public. Not sure why that is looking like that, but it is. We will add the README. That doesn't matter. None. Let's for now, let me put in here nothing. I don't know if that's why this isn't working or not, so I'll put in none. Why am I getting that? Select an owner. Oh, because it's not me. There we go. That should help. There we are. All right. So it's mine. There, it's not grayed out anymore. Let's see. We will go back and add that MIT. And I'm going to click Create Repository. The only reason I'm doing this is to show you we have a thing called First Node App. And you might say, who cares? I'm going to show you that right now. So I'm jumping back into here, and I'm going to type in npm init. Now, when you are doing this, when you are typing in npm init, if you don't want to go and answer any questions, boom, you just want it to accept every default, you put in here -y. We don't want to do that. I'm going to hit enter here. And I want you to look, and you'll notice all that's in here right now is my app.js. That's all that's in here. So it says, what do you want to call your package? That's what it's going to create. It gives it the same name as the folder it's in, First Node, which is fine. So I come in here and I hit enter. It says, what version is this? 1.0.0 is fine. It says description. So this will be my first NodeJS application. Hit enter. The entry point. Well, that's the only thing, so it recognized that. App.js. I hit enter. The testing stuff we're not going to worry about, so we're just going to hit enter. The Git repository, I'm surprised because normally it picks it up in here, but as of right now, I guess these aren't talking to one another. So let me go back and let me grab this, because there's the Git repository right there. And I'm going to grab it and I'm going to put it there and hit enter. Keywords, I typically leave this blank. We could put Node.js in here. We could put a whole bunch of stuff in here, but I'm just going to leave it blank. The author, typically, as you'd guess, you'd put in your name. The license, well, we used MIT before, so I'll put it there. Now, I'm going to hit enter. Watch what happens, please, over here. All right, it has created this file that's called package.json. This is what's in the file right here. Everything within these curly braces. So it says the name of your package is First Node. It's version 1. There's the description. Right now we only have this one script in there, which will change shortly. We have a Git repository, and this is where it lives. Here's the author. Here's what we're using for a license. And this bugs thing that just adds this for you automatically. Now, is this okay? You can either type in a Y or a yes, or the easiest is to hit enter. When I hit enter, watch what happens here. It now added a new file called package.json. It just added the package.json file to my project. And what is that file? Well, you shouldn't be surprised to hear it's the same one that's right here. So if I bring it up here, all right, there it is. Not there. Let me, because I made this real big. There it is. But that file looks virtually the same as this file right here, because it is the same file. All right, it's just, is it showing it to you in what format? All right, in other words, is it showing it to you in Visual Studio Code, or is it showing it to you from the terminal? All right, I don't need this open anymore, so I can close it. Now, what you're going to see in just a minute, and this is the reason I'm showing you this, we're going to go in and we're going to add NodeMon. When we do add NodeMon, we're going to get a folder that's going to be put over here. I think it'll add it now when we do this. That's called node_modules. All right, and it's a very, very, very important folder. All right, so let me come back down to here. And again, I'm going to jump. Let me clear the screen here. All right. And now going back, and I'm at 35 minutes. So what I should be doing is just stopping and starting this in a new project, and I think I'll do that.